CEO Colin Padget of Founders Metals joining me here again to discuss recent news out of them. Drilling in Suriname at the Antino project is in full swing for Founders Metals. And just a couple of days ago, some long anticipated results out of recent new results out of Upper Antino, which will be sort of the heart of this conversation. But there's a bit of a grab bag as always. I've never been known to be too economic in my interviews, and so there will be a couple more questions after that for you too, Colin. But no, Colin, yeah, good to see you again, Colin. How's it going? You are down there in Suriname right now, eh?
I am just arrived, yeah, great to be back on and chatting through these things. So happy to get into it.
Yeah, no, appreciate the time, and yeah, thanks for showing up. So no, we'll walk through the news release here. This is what, Wednesday now, and it came out Monday. I mean, you can see it. I've got it up there. Founders Metals expands high grade gold zone at Upper Antino. 46 meters of 3.59, and then yeah, extending it to depth, to 500 meters. So maybe I'll have follow-up questions and sort of try to tease things out or guide it as is required. But could you just walk us through with a little bit more depth or context than just your news release? Can you just walk us through these results? Right, you got 7 holes from Upper Antino that released. Place them in context, I guess. Right, I mean, you highlight 3 things in the article, in your news release: continuity, depth extension, and parallel shears. So I'm sure that there'll be things that you'll want to talk about. But can you just, what does this do for you? What data does this tell you? What doors does this open? What doors does this close? And I'll hold off on adding any more to that question for now.
Sure. Well, I mean, to start from the top, yeah, we're excited to get news out. A little over 3,500 meters in this press release, all from Upper Antino. And the big one, I mean, everyone likes a big number, and the 46 meters, 3.59, was a really fantastic interval, and we saw really great continuity extension from some of the high grade stuff to the south of that intercept. So it was great to see that step. That's a 50-meter long strike step of one of these. What we're starting to understand is these sub-parallel ore shoots that are plunging kind of shallowly to the northwest. So that continuity is really important in the bigger picture mining scenario. Being able to tie these steps together, particularly the high grade broad zones. That's where you add a lot of ounces quite quickly, especially when you're dealing with grades like that. After that, the next thing in this press release is the extension to depth. So this is the first couple of holes in the deeper drilling. We bought a couple of new drills earlier this year, got them on the ground, and got one set up for deeper drilling in general. It's just got a bit more power than the ones before, so it makes that a bit more efficient. So those holes, actually seeing mineralization continue to depth was the key takeaway. I mean, it's first 2, so it would have been nice to have the 46 at 3.59 down there, just because I think that that'd be a great news story. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're still seeing considerable widths, and we're seeing still some good grade down there. So for being the first couple of holes of it's NQ size core when we're getting down there, so it's a pretty small sample size at this point, but those structures are there, as I think we anticipated, given the scale of this structure and the proximity to the bigger central Guyana shear zone. So it just adds a lot more potential to the overall Upper Antino story when it comes to pulling things down deeper. So we're down to, basically 500 meters with the deepest intercept, a little bit shallower, around the kind of 450 range. We had that 21-meter interval of 0.73. Again, same sort of thing. I would love for that to be a really, really high grade one on this first couple of holes, but that wasn't the point of the message here. I mean, the mineralization as we see it in the core looks very similar to the shallower mineralization. So we see that same sort of potential as being there at depth as we see higher up in the package. But having structures of that scale at depth, mineralized, that's what we wanted to hit, and that's what we found. So it's just the start of the deeper drilling piece. We're going to be continuing that along strike, just kind of flesh that out. We're really still are focusing, ultimately drilling on this kind of down to 300-ish range. I think that's what would be a reasonable sort of pit depth initially, and it's probably long term in terms of capital efficiency going to be what we target. But we're excited to be hitting these things at deeper levels, just to show that there's that continuity of that mineralized system or the gold system down deeper, with no end in sight, so to speak. So that was a good one. And then the last piece in this release, it's nice to kind of put out points on all three fronts, was the extension or the continued kind of growth of those parallel shears as we move towards Donut to the east there. So in the in this section here, so hole Froyo 126 there, the 28 meters of 1.18. As we come into the core of the structure, so I can't draw on this screen, but if you remember, Donut and Froyo zone kind of sit on the limbs of this larger fold that's plunging to the northwest. As we come into the core of that, it's getting into, there's some intrusive rocks mixed in there. So the contacts with these intrusive rocks and some of these volcanics or sedimentary rocks, those are always very favorable places for mineralization. So we're happy to be seeing that and those kinds of grades as we continue to step.
That's the sort of context we're looking for here. But so I think maybe I'll taking what you just said and working with it again here. So the quote that kind of stands out to me: standout FR 120 intercepted 46 of 3.59, successfully targeted shallow plunging, northwest trending orientation of a high grade chute along the main shear at Froyo, 50 meters along strike step, and serves to reinforce the continuity of those domains. Pretty much just kind of what you just said, right? I guess and so maybe try to take this for a step. And I know that this is one of those things where data sets, data points are limited, and you can't extrapolate too far. And we all know what happens if you make assumptions of whatever, right? But can you get a sense of what the system's doing? I mean, you've already, there is a bit of a tell here already, right? I mean, it is told here to a degree, but what is it doing? Where is it swelling? Where is it pinching with these new results? Like what is this trend? Center of mass? I mean, is it picking up, losing steam? I mean, like you say, the proof of concept of finding kind of long, healthy intervals of lower grade, but I mean, like you say, the proof of concept is significant. But what evidence do you have to suggest that now you can maybe go back and not just 21 meters of 0.73, but maybe can you find 20 meters of 7.3? Where are your thoughts with, I guess maybe step one, not to make this too complicated. Sorry, Colin. Where is your sense of this new data point in terms of center of mass? I mean, do you think that there's still, when we talk about the massive success of Upper Antino, which you see me circling here, I mean, is it thinning out as you trend, or do you still think that there's full potential for it to be just as huge as the original sort of discoveries here?
No, we think the potential is there for it to be the same. Like there's a lot of data points in that kind of central 800 or 900 meters in the kind of central Froyo area, right? And so as you move, to the north on the plan view map here, or to the left in the long section that you have, really, like, that's a paucity of data. It's not a paucity of gold. And so it's a case where these sorts of deposits, they require drilling to properly define them, properly understand them. And that's what needs to happen. And even in that, if you jump back to the long section, I can point to it. Like, we've got the, we put this previous released, this from a little while ago, the 23 meters of 5 from Froyo 090. It's kind of a long trend in that kind of, shallow plunging, ore shoot sort of idea. But that's an example of you having that high grade mineralization out there. And it requires a certain number of data points to really flesh that out. But I do think very much there's a very strong potential, excuse me, for high grade to continue in that direction. And it'll just take a bit more drilling to put it together, which is what we're doing. And then with that repetition piece, I've got 3 arrows drawn on this image here. But it's really just like a kind of an initial introduction to this idea. And we're I think it's starting to gain quite a bit of confidence that there is this plunge to the overall kind of ore body. And I don't see it as only 3. That's just meant to be a schematic representation of what these things, are potentially doing. And so when you look at a vein system on surface, like in plan view, you'd expect to see that kind of pinch and swell sort of in and out, shape to it, where it's anastomosing. And then that same thing happens in the dimension to depth as well, right? So you've got areas that are going to be narrow and you've got areas that are going to be wider. And the beauty of the Upper Antino deposit has been that those widths have typically been, pretty sizable, pretty substantial.
Pretty healthy.
Yeah. So, you're hitting 8 meters, 24 meters, 46 meters. Like, these are all things, if you think about 8 meters and what that is. So that's the smallest one on there. And that 8 meter interval, I mean, you're what, probably 2 meters high. If you take four of you and lay them down in your living room, like
That's
that's a
mineable. Yeah.
pretty big piece of ground. And then when you think about what 46 meters actually looks like, you do the same. Like that's almost half of a football field.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that's a big interval with a lot of gold in it. So it's that sort of context that, you know, really it's sometimes hard when it's just a lot of, bubbles on a map or on a section that, to really visualize, but that's a lot of volume. And that's why these things for us are really exciting. And I think that's, yeah, it's probably context that I was going to wait to the end to say, but we're working pretty aggressively on getting some updated marketing stuff out, and I'll go into details maybe later. But the big one is verify and having the 3D piece to really spin around for people, so everyone can actually take this, and instead of it just being this 2D slice on a screen, you can spin it around, see where these high grade shoots and where these high grade hits are in relation to other drill holes, and people can start hopefully like visualizing and seeing that kind of half a football field scale of some of these intervals as well.
No, I think that's, yeah. It was me ad-libbing here, but no, setting aside their forays into AI work here, but I mean, just the visual models that Verify do, I think that's extremely impactful. No, I think that's exactly right. It can be a challenge to wrap your head around complex systems, a layman, even a committed layman, right? I mean, I'm sure even being in the game as a trained professional can be a challenge sometimes to get your head wrapped around what's going on subsurface. So no, I think that's a smart call. The note that I took, and now maybe I'll return to this. I mean, I think we've touched on this before, Colin, but I mean, you start to make, I think I start to kind of salivate a bit at the concept of potential continuity between Froyo and Donut, right? I mean, what can you maybe touch on that a bit more? I mean, like you say, you see some sort of geological evidence to be optimistic that this might happen, but you think that with enough drilling, I mean, you have sort of wisps of smoke or fire here that suggests that this might be just one large envelope, one larger kind of continuous system, or where does that stand?
Just the straight answer right now is we don't know, because we haven't put holes into it. But we smoke is the right words. I mean, on the ground from a mapping standpoint, I mean, it has all the same structural features. We see veining at surface, within that area, and we're starting to put holes into it. Like that's an ongoing plan right now. So we should have an answer here in the relatively near term, as far as what that potential can look like. And yeah, putting it together does make for that's almost a kilometer across strike, or actually a little bit more than a kilometer if you include some of the stuff that's over closer to camp. So it's a big opportunity for adding. Like right now, if you were to take it as is, I mean, it's a big enough gap between the Froyo mineralization and the Donut mineralization that those would be two separate. If it was a pit, those would be two separate pits, because you wouldn't mine all the material in the middle. If there wasn't gold in it, they're far enough apart. But if we can fill that gap more, then yeah, there's potential everything gets captured as one larger body. But that remains to be seen. But that's I think one of the exciting parts of the growth potential at Upper Antino, there's a cross strike, the to depth thing adds a whole lot. Like anytime that you can increase one of those dimensions, when you're building out the volume math, it's always a good thing when it comes to additional ounces and potential future resource numbers.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you can look at, this is where my advantage of having been down there a couple of times and helping myself sort of spatially squared away. But, you see a lot of artisanal work, the local miners, a lot of work here, and you can see it in the grade out from the plan view here, from the satellite mapping. But yeah, in between here, it's still untouched, right? Still mostly unworked. You can see a couple of pathways or roads there. Is there a reason for that? I mean, this is where one of those things where maybe you haven't asked the local miners and their 30 years of experience about why they have or haven't hit there. But is there a reason why that remains untouched by them, or have they hit it, or it's just is there a reason why this is still undrilled?
Because they didn't get there before we they didn't get there before we did. I think is probably the short answer. I mean, if you were to look at this same map, in the kind of the reunion gold days in mid 2000s, I mean, they had almost no mining here at all, right? So it was, which is, I think, part of our advantage actually has been that there's been these artisanal pits. Certainly at Froyo when we started, it made a big difference to just understanding the structure and the geology. But yeah, often times I think if there's no mining somewhere, it's not because they haven't found gold there is because they haven't gone there yet. Fortunately for us, like we have a really good relationship with the guys on the ground, and we're, you know, if we have a drill hole into something or it's an area that we're going to, you know, so basically Upper Antino as a whole, like there's no expansion or you know, of these like this surface mining type thing. It's all very constrained, and yeah, the gold's not disappearing on us, sort of thing. But no, I wouldn't read into that too much. They're not out there typically actively prospecting in the same way that we would be, you know, in terms of auger sampling and channel sampling and all of that. It's a lot more if you're within a pit and the gold is continuing, then they continue mining that gold. And if that stops, then maybe you're branching out or they're branching out looking for something new. But yeah, at this point, yeah, the drills will be the deciding factor there.
But maybe we'll do a half transition here and maybe sort of put you on the spot or make it a bit more pointed here. And
Sure.
hopefully you can appreciate it's a good faith exercise here, right? But I mean, 46 of 3.6, that's a pretty good hole, right? And so I think that, that's one of those kind of 100 gram meter per ton holes that people like to see, grabs the market's attention a bit, but then kind of the response has been flat, right? And I know that when you get to a company of founder size, one hole typically doesn't change kind of that trend, right? But it's also people were also anticipating and eager and excited for Upper Antino to get returned to, knowing that it is this huge kind of sort of home base for you right now in terms of success. And so I guess my question is, I mean, you can probably infer already, and people at home too, right? But I know, and I'll preface this by saying I know that CEOs, everybody I talk to, I mean, they use share price as sort of their approval rating barometer. And I think that absolutely can be an exercise in insanity and in an irrational market, right? That there are things that's out of your control, but also understandable, right? It's the easiest way for you to see, how am I doing, right? And so what are your thoughts on I mean, 2024 was an incredible year, and you had, very, very strong start. I mean, the sort of start to projects that I think any company would be envious of. But now
Absolutely.
you're in the natural sort of doldrums that occur, right? And so I guess my question is, and I'll ask follow up as required. But what are your thoughts on these sort of the 6 months of doldrums, or 3 to 6 months of doldrums now, where the share price is flagged and come back a bit, and maybe is less, is it fair to say less responsive to good news? I don't want to go too far here, but maybe we'll just start there. Right? What are your thoughts on the doldrums right now that the share price itself finds itself in?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I mean, there's the broader market piece, and whilst gold has been on a pretty historic tear here, with some pretty impressive numbers right now, this kind of north of 3,400 sort of range, and tagging all-time highs, well, the end of last week and this week sort of thing. So it's when it comes to the bigger picture, reaction from the market for single drill hole type thing. Like at Upper Antino, there's I think a risk reward reaction, formula. And at Upper Antino, we've de-risked that to a pretty sizable extent. We're all very comfortable with there being quite a bit of gold in the ground up there. I mean, we've put a lot of holes out that have been, those 100+ gram meter products. So, the adding one more of those is only incremental gain, but I think it continues to de-risk that Upper Antino story. When we look at that particular hole, that's a additional, it adds more confidence to the continuity aspect, to the high grade components that we've identified so far. It still has a lot of value, and I think those are things that get reflected in the share price over time. They're not the one-off needle movers. I think for us, when it comes to really driving the share price forward, it's going to come from exploration. I think long term it comes from this sort of continued drilling, eventual resource type work and all of that. But that's still a long ways out for us. Like we're very much an exploration company. We just have a very advanced exploration target right now at Upper Antino, and then we've got these intermediate targets with Lower Antino and Boise that we'll be getting some detailed plans out on here, kind of coming along with this marketing update, like the new presentation or deck material, website material that will touch on a bit of that. And then it's the further afield piece that really is what moves the needle. Maria Giralda, that's a 260 gram meter product. Having stuff like that just points to the potential for there to be more Upper Antinos. Van Gogh as well. We we had very exciting, like the 28 meters of 7, 72 meters at 2.38. Below that, we had a couple of disappointing holes at what looked like the long strike there, but it's very few holes into some really, really impressive grades. Like you'd be hard pressed to find gold projects out there with, in their first few holes on a new target that are hitting those sorts of numbers. So that Da Vinci is another great example, a little bit lower grade than the Van Gogh stuff overall, but still like broad intervals of gold mineralization. So those are just the start of, I think, what the potential is at Antino. And when we look at the share price, moving the needle for us is going to come from, and it came out in a couple of the notes following this week's press release, that Upper Antino continues to grow, and there's a lot of potential for that size to just add value. But the real needle mover is this new exploration and new discovery stuff. And so, we're taking that pretty seriously and doing a lot of service work and have quite a bit of that worked into this kind of upcoming dry season here that starts right around now. Could be a little drier, but yeah, we're coming into the dry season now. And so we've got, all fall where we're in a position where, access to everything is, back to kind of full open drills, back to testing these sorts of targets and getting news flow out on these exploration pieces, alongside the surface work, the trenching, the, big picture auger sampling programs, the geophysics work. All of that is what really drives the story forward.
Yeah, need to. You're at your own company is at a size of a certain degree of critical mass that you need critical mass behind these discoveries to justify when you're a 3 or 4 or $500 million company. Yeah, just one hole isn't enough, right? You have to develop or prove that there's a system around that hole, I guess, as well, right? So I mean, to keep you just on the hot seat for a second here, longer, Colin, you remain an exploration story, and I agree with that, right? This is not a development story. You have way too many meters to come this year, next year of just pure discovery to start worrying about the economics of whatever. And I'll preface this by saying that Founders is still, I'm supremely confident in, right? The share price, and you can talk about delays or whatever, right? But that the potential here remains tier one and it is unique. And it's one of those projects that you should be attracted to because the results, as you can see here, right? I mean, this 28 of 7 or 22 of 11, I mean, those are the first 2, 3, 4 holes drilled on those targets, if my memory serves correctly. And so for me, and this is what like I said, that you and I threw this at you, that, I mean, right now at $3, this is still a 10 bagger or more for people that got in on at step one, right? And so I think that there's a natural evolution here where you're seeing, your speculative, risk tolerant retail are sitting on their 10 or 20 bagger. And for me, part of this is that there's a natural sort of passing of the baton from your kind of degenerate retail who's happy to go in pre-discovery and kind of ride that rocket or blow up on the launch pad, right? And then now to maybe more, we'd say larger or more conservative in their sort of risk tolerance, sort of mechanics, people that are starting to come into this on a different angle, right? Like that sort of proverbial people chasing 10 or 20 baggers versus people just chasing a 3 bagger, right? In terms of the risk reward tolerance. And so I absolutely think that that's at least part of this, but yeah. I still think that there's a question here. Are there parts of the story that have changed? To what degree has the share price flagging sort of been earned through events or non-events, right? Is this just a natural settling period, or do you think there are maybe some things that maybe it's stretching timelines or what, right? I mean, are there parts to founders that you think where maybe we could have done this better, or we need to prove or demonstrate that this is not an issue, maybe is a way to phrase it?
So, I mean, to your first point, I do think that there's a turnover in that, original shareholder base a bit. Although I still talk to a number of the shareholders that were in that very first placement at 20 cents and are still there today and have obviously, I think, stayed with the story and added since then, kind of thing, which is really great. Having that continuity from the beginning is really, really great to hear every time I do. And so, yeah, as far as like timelines or stretch timelines, and that's just something that we've had that feedback, on a few fronts. And when it comes to press releases, we don't have the drill result press release pace or timeline that we did in the earliest days, and that's when really it was a case of it's kind of every hole or 2 or 3, within the Upper Antino piece, yeah, we were getting news out very, very quickly or very regularly. So we've had additional timelines on the just the assay lab front. That's a longer. Back in the early days, I had a
Yeah.
rush that came back over a weekend. That doesn't happen anymore. But there's still that kind of 4 to 6 weeks window, and we're right now averaging about a press release a month with drill results. With other things around that, which is I think still a reasonable pace for an exploration company at our scale. And so there's maybe is a bit of a expectation reset there, and I still think that that's a reasonable pace for drill results going forward. I mean, if like we do our best to increase that pace, and but I think the thing that probably will I think help or has certainly been feedback we've gotten is just I think seeing me out actively doing more things like this chat here is the thing that we will be ramping up quite a bit of, and one of those is starting kind of a regular fireside type chat that I think Chris was pretty famous for, but getting into doing some things like that where it's talking around the press releases, and really a lot of these press releases too, they wind up being kind of one off or like standalone in a way, where you wouldn't necessarily understand the full context, full scale and opportunity that Antino represents if you only read just that press release and didn't do more digging into the deck or into the website. And so I think those then give that opportunity to me and us, my broader team as well, to get out there and have that message proliferate a little bit more than it has done, I think, over the last few months, and have people really understand that the scale potential here is enormous. Upper Antino is a fantastic, gold deposit in its own right. It's really exciting to see that continue growing. But the geologist in me is, very much excited about all of that further field piece. Like we're learning new things all the time about the structure, about the geology, about what drives mineralization, what controls it, like this plunging ore shoot piece, how that ties into mineralization we know from elsewhere around the concession. It's all very important to just driving new discoveries, exploration on the ground, and adding value, finding that other upper Antino, so to speak. I think that's.
Well, and then maybe, and so, no, finish your
I
thought.
just gonna say I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, good. It's yeah, no, it does absolutely right. I think that people that like you kind of nailed it, right? I mean, people want to hear from you. That's the thing is that it's that's kind of your job for good or for ill, right? Is come in and provide that context.
yeah.
And so you discussed that need for high grade, and so I do want to talk about that, but maybe I will just because we're talking about timelines. I mean, land deals and renegotiating original option agreements. I mean, is it fair to say, or what in terms of timeline stretching? Is there anything you can explain about why that process is maybe taking longer than you had hoped or had assumed, or where is that at?
Well, so I mean, anytime you're talking about things that involve negotiation, there's always the other side of the table, right? So and I can only move things so fast, and we always want to make sure that we're getting a best value for shareholders when it comes to actually doing a deal. In terms of, that kind of leads into actually one of these sort of messaging things. And I was talking to a shareholder just recently, and, they had asked about the corporate items, as this kind of thing that we dangled out there. And I think, a good portion of the corporate item, expectation was actually the 70% or like that stage 2 milestone, because internally nothing I think in this business or really any business is done until it's done, and getting stage 2 complete was a really big milestone for us internally. That's 70% of the property, controlling interest, kind of interest in the board of the company that holds the concessions here locally, on the ground, like a big piece where it makes a difference on the go forward from a just de-risking standpoint overall. And so that was a big item for us, but the market, I think, already assumed it was a fait accompli, and that's fair. I mean, there's no reason not to have assumed that it would happen, but it was still a big deal for us. So that was part of that kind of corporate item spot. The concession stuff is still ongoing, and I fully expect to see some growth of the land package or new concessions here in 2025. I'm not going to promise any tighter timelines than that, but 2025, I'm pretty happy saying, and I think that's another thing that really can drive the story here, or move the needle in terms of share price if we're talking about numbers specifically. Like adding that additional ground just it's not to add a whole bunch of new targets, and that's not going to be our approach at all when it comes to these new concessions. But it's adding that potential for ourselves if we're on the route of developing things into a mine long term, and then wanting that long term exploration potential to grow that, or if it's the M&A kind of future acquirers,
Mhm.
that those land package numbers like the 5, 6, 7, 800 square kilometer type things. Excuse me. That's where you get your, the 50-year mine life, and where the things like, I look at Rosebell, I look at Marion, and both of those are sub 2 million ounce gold deposits at the start, and
Mhm.
they're both north of 10 million today.
Yeah, yeah.
And that came from not just continuing to drill like some of the big underground things elsewhere. That's continuing to explore on the same land package, understanding the geology better, developing from there, and then continuing to mine once it's already a mine. So that's, yeah, I think the exciting part about the concession piece is certainly that.
Yeah, and it's that thing where piercing the corporate veil. You can't release material. I mean, you can't just tell us about a negotiation that's ongoing and complete. But is there, in terms of those sort of land deals and option packages? I mean, it's just business as normal. Just takes a long time to get work done, or are there concerns that are evolving that you have to meet or whatever, or is it something that we just have to just have a
No,
little bit of faith and take patience?
yeah, faith and patience. I don't have any concerns like as far as like things have developed that have caused issues. There's nothing like that. It's just a pace thing. Different cultures negotiate differently. There's different approaches to things. There's communication sometimes takes time, and sometimes in some negotiations you've got to be okay walking away for a little while and then coming back to it if it's something you're really keen on. And it's all part of a process. So it's certainly a priority of ours to consolidate land, and we're definitely seeing movement on a number of fronts. So it's in terms of direction. I'm looking at your map here, but yeah, it just these things do take some time. But 2025, I'm pretty confident we can get something done there.
No, excellent. And this is again pursuing the concept of future discovery. And so one of a couple of site visits under my belt down there now. One of the people that I went with, the kind of quote that resonated with me was, "The odds of there being only a single Upper Antino down here are very small," right? And so that this sort of quest for another huge, surprising, high grade sort of 3 million ounce monstrosity to just really put a feather in the cap and kind of set this thing going. Uh, do you need do you need another Upper Antino to justify future growth? And then sort of a flip side or kind of 1A, 1B relationship to that. Where does a low grade fit into that sort of story, right? You got Boise, you got Lower Antino coming up with very healthy, but albeit lower grade sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those fit into this concept of do you need more high grade? And then kind of corollary to that is, where does low grade fit into this idea?
Well, need, want. Uh, More high grade is always a good thing. I think certainly, from a really moving the needle standpoint, more high grade or another high grade kind of Upper Antino-esque type deposit would really, I mean, that would be phenomenal to put that together. And so that's the goal. And when it comes to like prioritizing targets and drill meters or, personnel on the ground sort of thing, I mean, we do focus more on the higher grade end of the spectrum when it comes to the further out exploration, because that's just the best bang for the buck. The low grade piece or lower grade, and some of it's high grade. There's a pretty high grade core to that Boise stuff. But when I look at Lower Antino and I look at Boise and Parbo as well, maybe it has a similar signature to the Lower Antino stuff. We haven't done any drilling out there yet, but certainly in that historic augers and channel work sort of thing. But looking at Lower Antino and Boise, I mean, those two have this potential of the from surface, it's going to be lower average grade, but very much bulk mineable. And when I say bulk mineable, I mean, there's a potential for both of those that if we can build scale at either or both of them, I mean, that's the ideal. If you can build this sufficient scale there, then you then get into a much larger scale, like milling scenario, and that throughput goes up. The average grade that's coming out of those deposits is lower, but the economics can really work out well where if this is all, we're just talking ideas here, I guess,
Extremely
but
hypothetical. Yeah.
hypothetical,
Yeah.
yeah, just to throw in that, but like something like Lower Antino, we were really excited about the results out of that because those 28 holes we put out, there's gold in every single one of them. And we see a lot of consistency in that mineralization. And we've got that preserved saprolite piece. So there's the oxide component to it. But if you can build that into something of sufficient scale, then, your future mill, winds up sitting near the low grade. So you're not trucking it very far. And you wind up bringing in the high grade as either a blend or that's still your starter pit material, but you're trucking that the 3.5 kilometers to Lower Antino or the 5 kilometers to Boise kind of thing. And you just, you can work out the economics there where understanding those things early on means that there's potential for really pulling those ounces into a future, global resource. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's economic ounces out of the ground is the goal here. And so proving out those lower grade ounces and seeing a potential of that hub and spoke S type model, but really taking advantage of all of the two different styles of mineralization that we see at Antino. I think that's a really important part of our story. And it's something that, I think one of the very first interviews we did with Chris, and following his site visit there in December last year, that he was really impressed with is that you have both, and that was part of their story as well at Great Bear was having the high grade and low grade. And it's really important, I think, to giving additional flexibility to, what future mining can look like.
Well, no, this is something I've said. I wrote about this a month ago or something, right? That grade isn't king, economics is king. Grade is just the easiest sort of shorthand to assume strong economics. And so I think that's something that people have to keep in mind here too, right? That when you look at the jurisdiction, you look at the cost of exploration and mining, when you look at what you have already built in terms of sort of satellite deposits, I'm obviously I'm biased. I've been following you guys for a long time. I'm a supporter. I'm a follower. I work with you, but I still think that there's this immense potential that suddenly is getting less and less sort of credit by the market as time goes on here. That sort of panic that maybe people set in when they see their, you bought at $6 and now it's at 3, that can make you stressed. But I mean,
Yeah.
that's that potential disconnect between share price and what's going on the ground. I mean, and so because this is my example, I'll just transition to this. I mean, Maria Giraldo, which you referenced at the end of the news release that you're returning to after being unable to kind of get there efficiently with the wet season, 22 meters at 12 grams. I mean, just rounding here, right? I mean, that's a hell of a hole, and that's that's one of those things that can grow awfully quickly. And so I guess maybe I'll ask you to just touch on maybe kind of your earlier stage, higher grade things here a bit. But do they have, I mean, maybe the question I'll just kind of start with and let you take it from there after. But, Maria Giralda, Van Gogh, or Da Vinci, let's focus on Maria Giralda because that's what you named. Pardon me, but I mean, does
Sure.
it have the size, like the size of the anomaly, the size of the surface expression, geochem? I mean, does it have the size to be significant? Like, where is it at in terms of potential size of the anomaly compared to, I mean, Upper Antino or other kind of more developed targets?
Yeah, so Maria Giraldo is actually a good example of this because we do have some of those historic auger samples in the kind of broader space grids from early days on this property that point to there being a potential for some scale. Like you can see it's just south of Maria Giraldo on this map here. You've got a nice line of augers. That's, you look at the scale bar, that's a kilometer away from that 22 meters of 11.88. And so we're working on that right now. We're looking to get a release out next week, just updating people on kind of the up-to-date numbers that we're seeing in the auger sampling program and that sort of thing, and a few other kind of surface exploration items that we want to kind of keep people abreast of. And so, there is that scale potential, and I think that's true for all of these different targets. Is we've not found anything that kills scale. That we don't have the same data available to us as we get further out. Like Maria Giraldo, we have the benefit of, those are 400 plus meter spaced lines. So that's 400 meters is a pretty big
Yeah.
step when it comes to auger sampling. You think about a 2 meter auger and you think about being 400 meters away and you're connecting those dots. But the point is that there's gold down there. And so we're filling in those dots, the space in between to understand. And then we'll be using the drill to follow up on what we get out of that auger work. I think geophysics down the road here in the fall will also be quite informative for some of the further out stuff and help us refine targets that way before we're getting even farther away from the kind of Upper Antino main camp area. But no, to answer your question, the scale potential piece is there for all of them, and it's things like Van Gogh. We didn't have historic, so that's outside of that kind of historic auger program kind of window. So we don't have that context, but we're working on adding that, as well as Da Vinci, working on adding that, outside of the historic stuff and really knowing what is there from a scale potential, just in a surface expression geochemic anomaly sort of fashion. As yeah, we need that marker. I mean, it's it has to be big enough to matter, and that's really what we're chasing. But you'd be hard pressed, I think, to find a property that has, where it's 5 discoveries in the last 12 months, with 50, 100 plus gram meter products coming out of them in very, very early drill holes. And, even Upper Antino, the success we've had there. I mean, we came into, a couple of hits from the artisanal miners, gave us a lot more data. We had LiDAR that didn't exist previously. We had geophysics that we did ourselves, IP and magnetics. So we added a lot of data sets. We have to build up those data sets along with the drilling to put together these things that are out there. And that's just part of that exploration process. In a lot of camps, even in Canada, many of these things would be their own property, their own company, their own prospect. And we have all of them just on Antino, and an opportunity for there to be more down the road. But it's that whole piece is very exciting. That's what I like about it.
No, and that's yeah, like I say, at the risk of just, I mean, not just be upfront about the bias that I have here as a believer, right? But that's the thing, is that like I think people almost, when I hear people online talking about, there's not enough scale here for size to justify tier one, and I think that to me immediately reveals that you're not actually following this, because the I mean, like you said, first 4 holes at a Van Gogh, 100 gram meter, first 4 holes at a Maria Giralda, 100 gram meter, 200 gram meter, right? And I mean, heck, look at, I mean, that's 300 or 400 gram meter. I haven't had my cup of coffee yet here today, so my gears are turning pretty slowly. But no, I mean, it's the immediacy of success belies that maybe there's probably more to come, but you just got to get back to it, right?
I mean, that's the final, I think, message around that, is that, so coming into dry season, and able to ramp things up into dry season to, look, Upper Antino is going to always be the flagship, asset. That's what we're continuing to grow, build, and ultimately will be like kind of the underpinning of valuation and things going forward for the foreseeable future. But it's finding new things out here, finding another Upper Antino through this work, and getting into the fall, being able to be at full capacity again out on these things really, I think, puts us on a road where we have that improved or increased news flow around these sorts of targets, and get drills back on them, and hopefully hit some nice numbers and get some results out to people, and start showing one or more of these things growing. That's the goal for this fall. And we've got the dollars in the bank, we've got the drills on the ground, and the right people to do it. So there's a lot to come.
Get all the ingredients for a pretty successful little recipe after a bit of a lull there with an abnormally wet season after a couple of years of dry. It was my understanding that you had to slow you down and take you back home. Here you are, you get to kind of ramp up again, right?
Yeah, first 2 wet seasons were historic droughts of the like 30 and 40 year variety. So it was a bit of a learning curve for us on that front. But I mean, ultimately we were able to show, like, just getting drills backed up Antino, or I mean, Maria Giralda, we're still able to get to. Like, there's still quite a bit of property that we can easily access even in that wet season. So the drills can keep turning. But there was a period of sorting that out for sure on the ground.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you got a full rebrand coming up. Last question to you though, Colin, anything that you just wanted to highlight or touch on before we wrap it up here?
I think we've covered a lot of it. Just to reiterate the message, it's, keep on growing, work at Upper Antino. We've got the 3 drills are there right now. With the dry season, we'd be pulling some of that drilling capacity and moving it further out to start following up on some of these, things like, there's the 4th rig right now is at Maria Giralda, but getting back to Da Vinci, Van Gogh, Parbo, if we can get early access before those other ones, we probably would get out there and test some of what we're seeing on the ground. That's that's what's coming up. And the rebrand piece, rebrand sounds so strong. I like our brand. But it's more just getting an updated website and just making access to information a lot easier for shareholders. Is the idea behind the website piece, and then the verify modeling, all of that, having it available for people, so folks can spin around vein models and look at the assay results and that sort of thing in context and in that 3D space, because it's a lot easier to visualize than it is on a 2D slice. So looking forward to that.
No, perfect. Okay, awesome. Colin Padget, Founders Metals, FDR.V there on the venture. Thanks for your time again, and we'll good luck. Go hit some bonanza, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.